What is a substance? Well, the way that Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas define substance is a thing which exists on its own and not in another. Now, what are some examples of things that exist on their own and not in another? Well, a human being, right? So I'm a human being. I exist on my own and not in another, right? And that's as opposed to an accident, right? Now, an accident doesn't exist on its own. An accident exists in another. So let me give you an example. Color, right? Or size. Size is an accident. It exists in a substance. So what's my size, right? I'm a size 34. Okay, that's an accident. I could be a size 34, and I would still be me. I would still be this substance. But an accident is that which exists not on its own, but in another, right? Namely, in a substance. So substance is a thing that exists on its own and not in another. And an accident is a thing that exists not on its own, but in another. So a substance, another example of a thing that exists on its own, usually living things are good examples of substances. So a human being, an animal, a plant, even something like wood, right? You could say that wood is a substance, or you could say water is a substance, or stone is a substance. There comes a point, though, when it seems that there are some things that don't exactly exist on their own, but they don't exactly exist in another, right? For example, a pile of something, right? What do you call a pile of rocks? Well, St. Thomas Aquinas would call that an unum per accidens, right? Which is Latin for an accidental union. That means it's not exactly a thing that exists on its own, but it's not exactly a thing that doesn't exist on its own in another, right? So it's just sort of a united pile of stuff, right? A pile of rocks is this sort of unum per accidens, or an accidental union. So nobody really cares about unum per accidens very much. The point of substance is to understand that it's a thing that exists on its own and not in another. Of course, a lot of controversy comes up about this. Okay, well, what about something like a house, right? Is a house a substance? Is a house a thing that exists on its own, right? Or is a house more like just a pile of rocks? It's just some stuff that's been thrown together here and there, and it's really just an accidental union, right? What about bread, right? Is bread a substance, right? The classic example of substance to explain substantial change is wine, right? So wine turns into vinegar. It goes from being the substance of wine to being the substance of vinegar. There's a substantial change that's happened. But is wine even really a substance, or is wine just kind of an accidental union of a lot of different substances, like water and, little drops of, solids and, little other things that are mixed in there, right? Is wine just some kind of a mixture, or is wine a substance? And if it has some kind of uniting principle, then it's a substance. But the point isn't so much to say, is this a substance or is that a substance? The point is to get substance. The point is to understand what substance means, as opposed to accident, right? So substance is a thing that exists on its own, and an accident is a thing that exists not on its own, but in another. There are always going to be some strange examples like, okay, well, what about a pile of rocks? Okay, a pile of rocks, fine, it's not a substance, it's just sort of this accidental union. There are always going to be examples that it's hard to decide which category they fall into. But again, that's not the point. The point is to understand substance and accident. And once you understand substance, then we can talk about substantial change.